Okay, guys, this is day 2 of the Cold War, 1945 to 1960. Our foreign, what's going on in the foreign agencies. So in 1949, this is a key year. The United States is not the only nation with an atomic bomb. So it's going to become the second nuclear power, and this is now the nuclear race on. So two major things happen. The USSR gets the bomb, and Mao declares that China is now a communist nation. In response to this, the United States kind of panics, and we are going to quadruple our defense budget. We are spending money on missile defenses, missile sites for delivery of weapons, stockpiling more nuclear weapons. So we see this as a very, very serious thing to our security. Remember the Warsaw Pact? Now they're going to have the Sino-Soviet Pact, and China is going to sign a treaty with the Soviet Union, and now the Soviet Union is pretty much covered on its east coast and its west coast. In 1950, okay, a little background here. Remember Yalta again. At Yalta, Soviet Union agrees to help us out in the Pacific as soon as the war is over in Europe. And as part of that help, they invaded into occupied Korea and are forcing the Japanese out. Well, as they're invading from the north, the United States came into Korea from the south. And ultimately, because again, Russia is backing down, they establish a government in North Korea. North Korea had been occupied for a very, very long time by Japan. So they're going to divide Korea here on the 17th parallel. I'm so sorry. The 38th parallel. I'm thinking I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so the 38th parallel, and North Korea's capital is going to be Pyongyang, and South Korea's capital is going to be Seoul. The People's Democratic Republic, which is communist, is going to be in the north. North Korea decides that they want to take over, and we have troops in South Korea. We also have troops in Japan because we've got Douglas MacArthur there rebuilding Japan after the war. So these UN troops come in to fight. They cross over the border. We are actually forced all the way down to the south of Korea and fighting along the way. And this is going to be the first time that the UN is going to be called in to do something. So the UN says this is an act of aggression. They're going to put together UN forces. And since Douglas MacArthur is right there in Japan, he's going to be put in charge of these troops. He's really pretty brilliant. You're going to watch a little Ed puzzle on the Korean War. And he is able to force the North Koreans back across that 38th parallel, and he's moving to the north, and as he gets too far north towards that China border, the Chinese come in, and this is going to turn into a state. So this is a sign that the war actually begins at the 38th parallel, and ironically it's going to end right there at the 38th parallel. This is sometimes called the Forgotten War, although 50,000 Americans will die in it. This is the first time we're going to see jets used in a war. And it is kind of miserable. It gets very, very cold in Korea. Very, very difficult fighting conditions you can see here in the snow. our troops are. And it's a very tough war. I'm sorry, I'm going to come back here. Okay, General Douglas MacArthur is ultimately going to be fired for insubordination. He's going to criticize Truman for not dropping an atomic bomb on China and North Korea. And you don't do that. You don't criticize your commander. 1952 comes along and a new presidential election. And here comes Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now, Dwight D. Eisenhower, remember, head of the Allied forces, and he is going to be president under some of our best economy and some of our worst tension and foreign. So just a few things about him. He's a Republican. Nobody knew what he was until he decided to run. His nickname was Ike. He had 7 brothers, and all of them had a nickname Ike. He's going to be put to the test with integration, because when he's president, that's when we get Brown versus Board of Education. And they're going to be testing him. Is he going to back up that Supreme Court decision or not? So he is one of 7, and actually they had been conscientious objectors, but he went to West Point and becomes the ironic thing is one of our great generals. So what's going on in Vietnam? Okay. Before World War II, Vietnam was a French colony. During World War II, Japan occupied Vietnam. Vietnam has a lot of rice resources and fishing resources, and Japan was pretty brutal to a lot of the Vietnamese. But Ho Chi Minh had wanted independence. He'd wanted independence. He was a nationalist from France. He'd actually traveled the world. He could speak numerous languages, super intelligent guy. And when the Japanese invaded into Vietnam, he became an ally of the United States. And he fought against the Japanese, and if he killed a few French along the way, that didn't bother him a bit, because remember, the French were his enemy as well. He had a wonderful general, very brilliant guy named General Gap, who hated the French, hated the Japanese, and is going to continue to fight with Ho Chi Minh for independence. So after the war, France wanted their colony back, and Ho Chi Minh wanted his country. Ho Chi Minh writes this beautiful Declaration of Independence, kind of like our Declaration of Independence, and sends it to Truman. Truman does not even acknowledge it, and says, well, France was our ally, and the United States. Several battles ensue, but the final battle of the war is called the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. And this battle is going to last for 55 days. Nobody thought that, none of the French thought that the Viet Minh could infiltrate their camp at Dien Bien Phu, but they managed to go through the jungles. They surrounded them, and it basically was almost a massacre. They end up having to give up, and the French are going to leave Vietnam. But it goes to the Geneva Convention. And so at this Geneva Convention, they say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to divide Vietnam at the 17th parallel. And everything north of that, Ho Chi Minh, everything to the south of that, under United States auspices, they'll set up their own government. So this is kind of like what it looked like. And this is Ho Chi Minh down here. He was a hero to the people. He wanted Vietnam for the Vietnamese. We'll talk a lot more about Vietnam when we get to the 1960s. So this is the Eisenhower Doctrine. So again, don't write anything just yet. Eisenhower says He asserts the right of the United States to use force against any nation or group of nations in the Middle East region who request assistance against armed aggression from any communist-controlled country. So what does he mean? He means if there's any aggression going on, we'll meet aggression with aggression, and if necessary, we'll use nuclear weapons. So this is the Eisenhower Doctrine. A little bit different, a little more aggressive than the Truman Doctrine, but still an aggressive doctrine. Remember how we quadrupled our defense budget? We are going to even be spending more money on defense. And this is called the Massive Retaliation Plan. And it's a build-up of military and arms, more emphasis on weaponry, and that was, somebody said, yeah, with these new weapons, you're getting more bang for your buck. So, and during this time, of course, we're still building and improving on our nuclear capability. After the war, so many Jewish people had no place to go. They didn't want to go back to Germany. They didn't want to go back to Poland. And one of the things that they believed in was that God would provide a place for them. This is Zionism, a belief that one day God will allow them to return to Palestine. So this diaspora, these Jews who had been displaced or exiled, many of them made their way to Israel. Israel at this point had been controlled by England, Great Britain, and Great Britain is going to say, okay, we're out of here, you can be your own country. And in May of 1948, the United States is the first to recognize Israel as a country. Now, obviously, there's problems, there's still tension today. Here is, if you look over here, Israel is the green up there on the Mediterranean Sea, surrounded by these other countries that would just as soon see them gone. And there's going to be a series of wars, and we are going to be backing Israel. One of the organizations that is fighting for their people, still fighting for their people today, the Palestinians, the original Palestinian Liberation Organization is going to be led by Yasser Arafat for many, many years. And when he dies in November of 2004, Mahmoud Abbas will take over. He is still leading the Palestinians, and basically they are fighting for a better definition of their homeland, saying that, this is, they're still fighting over the land and the rights to the land. Ariel Sharon was the prime minister of Israel, and then right now it's Benjamin Netanyahu, and again there's some controversy over some of the things that he's been accused of here lately. In Iran, the man who was in charge was a man named Mohammad Mossadegh, and he wanted to nationalize all the oil wells. Well, a little problem with that's money, and with our newly formed CIA, they are going to use some dirty tricks, and they are going to be responsible for ousting him from power. And when he is ousted from power, he's replaced with a man who is sympathetic to the United States and to oil companies, a guy named Pahlavi, known as the Shah of Iran. He's going to have his own secret police forces. We'll be talking about him a lot. He'll be in power. We've talked about this a few times with the Iranian hostage crisis that's going to occur under Jimmy Carter in the 1970s. So he's going to be the leader because of the CIA kind of dirty tricks that get rid of Mossadegh. In Egypt, the leader is Abdel Nasser, And Abdel Nasser also wants his country asset for his country. So the Suez Canal had been built, if you can see, through, we'll show you a map, through Egypt, and he wanted control of the canal. And at this point in time, the French controlled the canal. So he wanted it back. This is going to end up in a war. So here's Suez Canal, and very important for trade, and especially when oil is needed so badly. Picture of the Suez Canal. And we had promised to help him with the Aswan Dam, and we threatened to pull back our help with this. He's actually going to seek help from the Soviet Union. This is a big mess. It's going to go to the UN, and the UN is going to step in and arbitrate a peace between these countries. Okay, Guatemala, 1954. This is another instance of the CIA flexing their muscles, and there's a perceived takeover by communists in Guatemala. And remember, we talked about the United Fruit Company, owned by Americans. They had bribed, and it comes down to money again, and the CIA is going to overthrow this perceived communist takeover. It's Guatemala. And Cuba, 90 miles from the United States. So we talked about the Spanish-American War, and we pretty much had control of Cuba economically and politically for all of this time period. As a matter of fact, the leader, Fulgencio Batista, had ties to the American mafia and was pretty oppressive to the Cuban people. So it was set up for a revolution, and y'all have heard of this man, Fidel Castro. And Fidel Castro is going to lead a revolution against Fulgencio Batista, and he takes over in 1959. And then he declares an alliance with the Soviet Union and declares Cuba to be a communist nation. Nikita Khrushchev is the leader at this time, and he takes power after Stalin dies in 1953. And he's a little guy, but he is very hardcore, and he is going to form this alliance with Fidel Castro. We've talked about this U-2 incident before. We're spying. They're spying. We're spying. Everybody's spying. But we have a U-2 that flies very, 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 very high up in the air. And it's a spy plane. And our pilots that are flying this, they are, if anything happens, they're supposed to destroy the plane, and they have the means. It's a coin with a poison that they are not supposed to be taken prisoner and basically kill themselves. As it happens, this U-2 is shot down, and Gary Powers is unable, he's the pilot, unable to destroy the plane. He's ejected, and he is captured. And when this happens, we are outraged. We just know the plane's gone down. We don't know that they have our pilot. We don't know that they have the plane, because the plane was not destroyed. It was damaged, but it was not destroyed. And we go to the UN and we demand an apology from the Soviet Union, and we are angry, and tensions are building up, and they say, oh, wait a minute, we've got your pilot. Wait a minute, we have pictures of the plane, and we are caught lying and spying. Jesus.